The crack of gunfire echoed across the dusty plains as Theodora Ellis ducked behind the saloon, her heart pounding like a runaway locomotive. She'd come too far to let her past catch up with her now, especially when she was just hours away from securing a new life as Matilda Winters in the bustling frontier town of Silverwood Creek. It was 1878, and the Wyoming Territory was a place where a person could reinvent themselves if they were clever enough and desperate enough. Theodora was both. At 22, she'd fled St. Louis with nothing but the clothes on her back, a handful of dollars sewn into her petticoat, and a secret that could get her killed. "Miss Winters," Sheriff Holloway called out, his voice carrying over the commotion of the main street. "Those men claim you're not who you say you are. I need you to come out and clear this matter up." Theodora pressed her back against the rough wooden wall, her fingers clutching the forged documents that declared her to be Matilda Winters, a schoolteacher from Boston seeking employment in the West. She'd been careful for months, perfecting her new identity, even adopting the slight accent and mannerisms she imagined a proper Boston lady might possess. "I ain't got all day, Miss Winters." The sheriff's patience was wearing thin. Theodora closed her eyes, steeling herself before stepping out from behind the building. 3 men on horseback flanked the sheriff bounty hunters, by the look of their weathered faces and the gleaming guns at their hips. The one in the middle, a pockmarked brute with cold eyes, pointed at her accusingly. "That's her. That's Theodora Ellis from St. Louis. She's wanted for theft, and I assure you, sir, there has been some mistake." Theodora forced her voice to remain steady, channeling every ounce of Matilda Winters she'd created. "My name is Matilda Winters. I have papers to prove it." The main street of Silverwood Creek had gone quiet, the usual bustle of commerce halted as townsfolk gathered to witness the confrontation. Theodora felt the weight of their stares as she held out her forged documents to the sheriff with trembling hands. Before the sheriff could take them, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. A cloud of dust preceded the rider who came barreling down the street, reining his horse to a dramatic halt between Theodora and the bounty hunters. "What seems to be the trouble here, Sheriff?" The newcomer's voice was deep and unhurried, carrying the quiet authority of a man who rarely needed to raise it to be heard. Theodora looked up at the stranger who had inserted himself into her predicament. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the afternoon sun. A well-worn Stetson cast shadows over eyes the color of a summer storm, and several days' worth of stubble darkened his jaw. He wasn't conventionally handsome. His nose had been broken at least once, and a thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, but there was something magnetic about his presence. "This ain't your concern, Prescott," the pockmarked bounty hunter spat. "We got business with this woman." The man called Prescott swung down from his saddle with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent most of his life on horseback. His spurs jingled softly as he stepped forward, positioning himself protectively in front of Theodora. "Seems to me that any business conducted in Silverwood Creek is my concern, especially when it involves 3 armed men threatening a lady." His tone remained pleasant, but Theodora didn't miss the warning in it. The sheriff cleared his throat. "These men claim this woman isn't who she says she is, that she's wanted back east." Prescott turned slightly, his gaze meeting Theodora's for the first time. Something flickered in those stormy eyes, recognition, perhaps, though she was certain they'd never met. The corner of his mouth quirked up in a subtle smile that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Is that so?" He looked back at the bounty hunters. "You boys got any proof?" "A wanted poster, maybe. Official papers." The pockmarked man shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "We got word from St. Louis. There's a reward. Hearsay don't count as evidence in Silverwood Creek, Prescott interrupted. Sheriff, you know as well as I do that these men can't just ride in and make accusations without proof. The sheriff rubbed his graying mustache, clearly torn between upholding the law and avoiding potential trouble with the bounty hunters. They got a right to file a formal complaint, Prescott. Sure they do, at the sheriff's office with proper paperwork, Prescott nodded agreeably. Not by accosting a lady in the middle of town. The bounty hunters exchanged glances, their earlier confidence wavering. The leader glared at Theodora. We'll be watching you, Matilda Winters. This ain't over. As they rode away, Prescott turned fully toward Theodora, removing his hat in a gesture of courtesy that seemed at odds with the dangerous aura he projected. Dante Prescott, madam. I own the Diamond P Ranch outside of town. Matilda Winters, Theodora replied, the lie sticking in her throat under the weight of his perceptive gaze. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Prescott. Please call me Dante. That slight smile returned, making the scar through his eyebrow crinkle. And you're welcome, Miss Winters, though I suspect that's not your real name. Theodora felt the blood drain from her face. I don't know what you mean. Dante stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You can't hide from my heart, Miss Ellis. The gentle teasing in his tone did nothing to soften the shock of hearing her real name. I recognized you the moment I saw you, though I must say you've changed since St. Louis. How did you? Theodora started, panic rising in her chest. I believe this conversation might be better continued somewhere more private. Dante gestured toward the curious onlookers who were still watching them with undisguised interest. May I escort you to the hotel? Theodora hesitated. This man knew her secret, knew her, yet she had no recollection of him. He could expose her with a single word, yet he just defended her against the bounty hunters. Could she trust him? Did she have a choice? Very well, Mr. Prescott. She lifted her chin, determined not to show fear. Lead the way. The Silverwood Creek Hotel wasn't grand by Eastern standards, but it was the finest establishment in town, with actual glass windows and a lobby furnished with plush velvet chairs. Dante secured them a quiet corner away from prying ears, ordering coffee from the nervous young desk clerk before joining Theodora. How do you know who I am? Theodora demanded as soon as they were alone, her pretense of being Matilda Winters temporarily abandoned. I don't recall ever meeting you. Dante's expression softened. You wouldn't remember me. I worked as a stable hand at your father's estate for a brief time when I was 19, just passing through St. Louis. You were 16 or 17 then, I reckon. Always had your nose in a book, riding that chestnut mare with the white blaze. Memory stirred a tall, lanky young man grooming her beloved horse, Penny. She'd barely noticed him then, consumed with her own adolescent concerns and the stifling expectations of St. Louis society. That was you, but you look so different now. The underfed boy had filled out into a formidable man, hardened by years of frontier life. 6 years can change a person, Dante agreed, then fixed her with a more serious look. Just like they might change a society debutante into a woman on the run. What happened, Miss Ellis? Last I heard, you were engaged to be married to some banker's son. The mention of her former fiancé made Theodora flinch. That's a long story, Mr. Prescott. I've got time. He leaned back in his chair, those storm-gray eyes never leaving her face. And considering I just stuck my neck out for you with some rather unsavory characters, I think I deserve to know what kind of trouble I've invited. Theodora studied him, weighing her options. She'd been running for so long, carrying her secrets alone. The burden of it was exhausting. My fiancé, Edmund Blackwell, was not the man my father believed him to be, she began quietly. Behind closed doors, he was cruel, controlling. When I tried to break our engagement, he threatened to ruin my family's reputation, to expose certain financial indiscretions my father had committed. Dante's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. 2 months before the wedding, I discovered Edmund was embezzling from his father's bank. He was using my father's good name to cover his tracks. Theodora twisted her hands in her lap. When I confronted him, he struck me. Said no one would believe me over him. Did you tell your father? Theodora laughed bitterly. My father was more concerned with appearances than truth. The Blackwells were powerful, connected. A marriage to Edmund would secure our family's position in society for generations. So you ran. Not immediately. First, I gathered evidence of Edmund's crimes ledgers, correspondence, enough to prove what he was doing. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The night I took those documents from his office, someone saw me. There was a struggle. The guard fell and hit his head. I didn't mean to, she broke off, unable to continue. You didn't kill anyone, Miss Ellis. She looked up sharply. How could you possibly know that? Because I read the papers. The guard recovered, and Edmund Blackwell was arrested for embezzlement 3 weeks after you disappeared. A small smile played at the corners of Dante's mouth. Your evidence found its way to the authorities, I take it. Relief weakened Theodora's knees. I mailed it anonymously before I fled. I never knew what became of it or him. Blackwell is serving 10 years in prison. The guard testified that he attacked you first, that you were defending yourself. Dante reached across the table, his calloused fingers briefly touching her trembling hand. You're not wanted for anything except breaking your engagement, which may be scandalous in St. Louis society, but isn't exactly a crime. Then why are those men after me? My guess. Edmund's father, Old Man Blackwell, doesn't take kindly to having his family name dragged through the mud. A private vendetta, not official justice. Dante's expression darkened. Men like that believe their money puts them above the law. Theodora absorbed this information, her mind racing. For months, she'd lived in constant fear, looking over her shoulder, creating elaborate covers. To learn that she wasn't actually a fugitive from the law was overwhelming. So I've been running for nothing. The irony of it made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. Not for nothing. Blackwell S.R. is not a man to cross lightly, and those men certainly seemed convinced there was money in bringing you back. Dante studied her face. The question is, what do you plan to do now, Theodora Ellis? Or do you prefer Matilda Winters? The way he said her real name sent an unexpected shiver through her. She'd been Matilda for so long that hearing Theodora felt strangely intimate. I don't know, she admitted. I came to Silverwood Creek to start over. I have credentials falsified, obviously to teach at the schoolhouse. Can you teach? Yes, actually. It was one of the few useful skills my finishing school education provided. A smile tugged at her lips. Along with embroidery and the ability to pour tea without spilling a drop. Dante chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. Essential frontier skills, to be sure. Their laughter faded into a moment of companionable silence. Theodora found herself studying the man across from her, trying to reconcile the stable hand she barely remembered with this confident rancher who'd come to her rescue. Why did you help me? She finally asked. You could have simply pretended not to recognize me. Dante considered her question, his expression turning thoughtful. 6 years ago, I was mucking out stalls when I overheard your father berating you for giving food to a homeless woman outside the gates. You stood your ground, told him that compassion wasn't a weakness even if he thought it was. Later that day, you brought me a sandwich from the kitchen when you thought no one was looking. Theodora remembered that day, her father's cold anger, her own stubborn defiance. but she had no recollection of bringing food to the stable hand. "You were kind when you had no reason to be," Dante continued. "I never forgot that. So when I saw you today, looking scared but still standing tall against those men, I figured returning the favor was long overdue." Something warm unfurled in Theodora's chest at his words. "That's a rather minor kindness to remember for 6 years. Sometimes the smallest gestures leave the deepest impressions, Miss Ellis." He stood, placing his hat back on his head. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I should have a word with Sheriff Holloway about our bounty hunter friends. I'd rest easier knowing they'd moved on from Silverwood Creek." "Of course." Theodora rose as well, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you again, Mr. Prescott." "Dante," he corrected, tipping his hat. "And don't worry. Your secret's safe with me, whether you choose to be Theodora or Matilda in Silverwood Creek." As he turned to leave, Theodora called after him, "How will I repay this debt?" Dante glanced back, that now familiar half-smile lighting his weather-worn face. "No debt between friends, Miss Ellis. But I wouldn't object to seeing you again, perhaps for dinner tomorrow evening." The invitation was unexpected, and Theodora found herself nodding before she could overthink it. "I'd like that." "Good. I'll call for you at 6. With a final tip of his hat, Dante strode out of the hotel, leaving Theodora to wonder how her carefully constructed new life had been so thoroughly upended in a single afternoon. The following morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of pristine September day that made the Wyoming Territory's rugged beauty impossible to ignore. Theodora stood before the mirror in her modest hotel room, trying to decide whether to become Matilda Winters again, or to embrace her true identity. The schoolmistress position wouldn't start until next month when the new schoolhouse was completed. Until then, she had time to establish herself in Silverwood Creek as someone. She'd spent nearly all her savings on the journey west and the forged credentials, leaving her with just enough to secure lodging for a few weeks. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Mrs. Reynolds, the hotel proprietress, holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you this morning, Miss Winters," the older woman said, her curious eyes scanning Theodora's face. "From Mr. Prescott." Word traveled fast in small towns. No doubt everyone knew about yesterday's confrontation and Dante's intervention by now. "Thank you," Theodora said, accepting the package. Once alone, she carefully unwrapped it to find a note atop a leather-bound book. "I thought you might enjoy this while you decide who you want to be in Silverwood Creek. Either way, I'm looking forward to dinner. D.P." The book was a well-worn copy of Emerson's essays. She opened it to find Self-Reliance marked with a pressed wildflower. A smile touched her lips at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Theodora spent the morning exploring the town, keenly aware of the curious glances from the townsfolk. Silverwood Creek was larger than many frontier settlements, boasting a general store, a bank, 3 saloons, a small church, and even a dressmaker's shop. The half-built schoolhouse at the edge of town stood as a testament to the community's commitment to establishing permanent roots. At the general store, she selected a few necessities, including ink and paper. The storekeeper, a jovial man with an impressive mustache, chatted amicably as he tallied her purchases. "You're the new school teacher, ain't you? My boy Charlie's excited to have proper schooling. Reads better than me already, but his sums need work." He wrapped her items carefully. "Name's Harold Miller. My wife Ida runs the boarding house just down the street if you're looking for more permanent lodgings than the hotel." "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'll keep that in mind." Theodora hesitated, then added, "Do you happen to know Mr. Prescott well?" Miller's eyes twinkled. "Dante. Known him since he came to these parts 4 years back. started with nothing but determination and worked his way up to owning one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. He leaned forward conspiratorially. "A good man to have on your side, Miss Winters. Fair in his dealings and generous when folks need help, though he keeps to himself mostly." "He seems capable," Theodora said carefully. Miller laughed. "That he is. Brought order to this town when we had trouble with rustlers last year. Organized the ranchers, worked with the sheriff. Got shot for his troubles but never complained." The image of Dante facing down armed rustlers added another dimension to the man who defended her yesterday. He was injured. Took a bullet in the shoulder. Doc Jenkins patched him up, but he was back on horseback before he should have been. Miller shook his head. "Stubborn as they come." Theodora left the store with her purchases and new insights into Dante Prescott. She spent the afternoon in her room, writing letters, one to her childhood friend Mary in Boston, the only person who knew the full truth of her situation, and another to the town council, formally accepting the teaching position but requesting to use her real name. It was a risk, but Dante was right. She wasn't actually wanted by the law. The bounty hunters were working for Blackwell SR, not any official authority. Continuing to use a false identity would only make her appear guilty of something if they returned with more questions. By the time 6 o'clock approached, Theodora had changed into her best dress, a modest blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her dark hair into a simple but elegant style. When another knock came at her door, her heart quickened in a way that had nothing to do with fear for once. Dante stood in the hallway, hat in hand, looking remarkably different from the trail-worn rancher of yesterday. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline, and his dark hair was neatly combed. He wore a clean white shirt under a black vest, with a string tie at his collar. His usual gun belt had been exchanged for something less imposing, though Theodora noted he still carried a weapon, a practical necessity in the West. "Miss Ellis," he greeted her, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "You look lovely." "Thank you for the book," she replied, suddenly feeling shy. It was a thoughtful gift, seemed appropriate. He offered his arm. "Shall we? I've arranged dinner at Francine's. Best food in town, though that's not saying much." Francine's turned out to be a small establishment attached to one of the more reputable saloons. It catered to the respectable elements of Silverwood Creek society, with private tables and actual tablecloths, luxuries in a frontier town. Once they were seated and had ordered, Theodora asked, "Did you speak with the sheriff about those men?" "I did. They left town this morning, headed east. Holloway made it clear that harassing citizens without proper legal authority wouldn't be tolerated." Dante's mouth quirked. "I may have mentioned that my ranch hands would take a dim view of any further trouble. So they're gone, just like that, for now. Men like that don't give up easily if there's money involved." His expression turned serious. "Which is why I was glad to hear you've decided to use your real name." Theodora blinked in surprise. "How did you know? Small town. Word gets around. Mayor Thompson mentioned you'd written to accept the teaching position as Theodora Ellis." He smiled. "It's the right choice. Living a lie takes its toll even when it's necessary." "You sound like you speak from experience." Something shadowed his eyes briefly. "Perhaps. We all have chapters of our lives we'd rather not read aloud." Their food arrived, surprisingly well-prepared steaks with potatoes and greens, providing a momentary reprieve from the conversation's deeper currents. As they ate, Dante told her about his ranch, the Diamond P, and how he'd built it from almost nothing after arriving in Wyoming with little more than the horse he rode, and the skills he'd learned working on other people's land. "What made you leave St. Louis?" Theodora asked, genuinely curious about the journey that had transformed the young stable hand into this confident rancher. Restlessness, mainly. I was never meant for city life. He took a sip of his coffee. My father died when I was 14. My mother remarried a man who made it clear I wasn't welcome once I was old enough to fend for myself. So I did just that, worked my way west, learning everything I could about cattle, horses, and surviving out here. And your mother died 2 years after I left. Consumption. His voice held old pain, long since accepted but never fully healed. By then, I was halfway across Kansas working a cattle drive. Didn't hear about it until months later. I'm sorry, Theodora said softly. Dante acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. Life out here teaches you to face loss head-on. Can't outrun it, can't hide from it. He studied her face. Is that what you were trying to do, outrun loss? The question caught her off guard. I suppose, in a way, I lost my life in St. Louis, my family, my future, everything I'd been raised to expect. Do you miss it? Theodora considered the question seriously. I miss certain comforts, and I miss my mother. She died when I was 18, before all the trouble with Edmund began. But the life itself, she shook her head. It was suffocating. Every decision made for me, every opinion carefully monitored and corrected if it didn't conform to what was proper. And now, what does Theodora Ellis want now that she's free to choose? It was a profound question, one she hadn't fully allowed herself to consider in the months of running and hiding. I want to teach. I want to make a difference in children's lives. I want. She hesitated, then admitted, I want to belong somewhere, to build something that's truly mine. Dante's eyes softened. That's a good dream, Theodora, one worth fighting for. The way he said her name with such quiet certainty made something flutter inside her chest. In that moment, with the golden light of sunset streaming through Francine's windows and the gentle hum of conversation around them, Theodora felt a curious sensation, like stepping out of a dark room into unexpected sunshine. After dinner, Dante walked her back to the hotel, the evening air crisp with the promise of autumn. Main Street was relatively quiet, with most of the town's more boisterous activities concentrated around the saloons farther down the road. Thank you for dinner, Theodora said as they reached the hotel's entrance. It was a welcome change from eating alone. The pleasure was mine. Dante hesitated, seeming suddenly less sure of himself than he had all evening. I know you'll be busy getting settled and preparing for your teaching position, but I'd be honored if you'd join me at the Harvest Festival next weekend. It's a town tradition: dancing, food, community gathering before winter sets in. The invitation sent a warm thrill through her. That sounds lovely. I'd be delighted to attend with you. Relief and pleasure brightened his expression. Good, that's good, he cleared his throat. I should let you get some rest. Good night, Theodora. Good night, Dante. On impulse, she extended her hand. Instead of shaking it, he raised it gently to his lips, the gesture both old-fashioned and unexpectedly affecting. The brief contact sent a current of awareness through her that lingered long after he'd released her hand and walked away, his spurs jingling softly in the gathering darkness. Theodora watched him go, marveling at how drastically her circumstances had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she'd been Matilda Winters, a woman in hiding. Tonight, she was Theodora Ellis again, not the sheltered debutante of St. Louis, but something new. A woman discovering what it meant to stand on her own terms, and for the first time since she'd fled east, the future looked less like something to fear and more like something to embrace. The next week passed in a flurry of activity, as Theodora settled into Silverwood Creek. After her third day at the hotel, she took Mr. Miller's advice and secured a room at Ida Miller's boarding house, a tidy establishment that catered primarily to the schoolteacher, the town's young, unmarried clerk, and occasionally traveling salesmen passing through. Ida, a motherly woman with shrewd eyes and capable hands, welcomed Theodora warmly. "It's about time we got a proper teacher in this town. Too many children growing up without their letters, especially the girls. My Harold's been doing his best with our Charlie, but there's only so much a man can teach when he's running a store from sunup to sundown." The boarding house room was modest but comfortable, a single bed with a patchwork quilt, a small desk by the window, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. It felt more like a home than anywhere Theodora had stayed since leaving St. Louis. She spent her days exploring the town more thoroughly, introducing herself to families with school-age children and helping to finish preparations on the schoolhouse. The building was simple but sturdy, with long windows to let in natural light and wooden desks being crafted by the local carpenter. Word of her true identity spread quickly, as things did in small communities, but to Theodora's relief, the reception was largely positive. Most folks seemed more concerned with her qualifications as a teacher than with whatever circumstances had brought her west. A few, like Mrs. Rutherford at the dressmaker's shop, hinted at curiosity about her relationship with the Prescott fellow, but Theodora deflected such inquiries with practiced grace. She saw Dante only once during that week, a brief encounter at the general store where he was purchasing supplies for his ranch. He'd tipped his hat, asked how she was settling in, and mentioned he was looking forward to the harvest festival. The simple interaction had left her unreasonably pleased for hours afterward. By the time Saturday arrived, Theodora found herself standing before her small mirror, fussing with her appearance more than she had in months. She'd splurged on a new dress from Mrs. Rutherford's shop, a forest green cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. It was far simpler than anything she would have worn to a St. Louis social event, but it suited both her new life and the frontier setting. Ida knocked on her door promptly at 6. "Your gentleman caller is here, Miss Ellis." Theodora felt a flutter of anticipation as she descended the stairs to find Dante waiting in the small parlor, hat in hand. He wore a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders surprisingly well, his usual trail dust nowhere in evidence. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and the appreciation that kindled in his eyes made her glad she'd spent the extra money on the new dress. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You clean up rather nicely yourself, Mr. Prescott." The teasing came naturally, surprising her with how comfortable she felt in his presence. He offered his arm with a smile. "Shall we? The festivities are just getting started." The town square had been transformed for the harvest festival. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between buildings, casting a warm glow over tables laden with food brought by every family in town. A wooden platform had been erected for dancing, and a small group of musicians, 2 fiddlers, a banjo player, and an enthusiastic harmonica player, were tuning their instruments. Children darted between the adults, their excitement palpable. The air was filled with the scents of roasted meat, fresh bread, and spiced pies, mingling with the crisp autumn breeze. It reminded Theodora of county fairs back east, but with a distinctly Western flavor, women in practical calico alongside men still wearing their gun belts, even in celebration. "It's wonderful," she breathed, taking in the scene. "So much life." "Wait until the dancing starts," Dante replied, guiding her toward the food tables. "These folks work hard all year. They know how to celebrate when the occasion calls for it." They filled plates with roast beef, corn bread, beans, and various pies and casseroles contributed by the townsfolk. Dante introduced her to ranchers, shopkeepers, and families she hadn't yet met during her week in town. Theodora was struck by how respected he seemed among the diverse community, from the Mexican vaqueros, who worked his ranch, to the banker's wife, who sought his opinion on a land purchase. "You've made quite a place for yourself here," she observed as they sat at one of the long tables, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of the festival. Dante shrugged, looking almost embarrassed by her assessment. "I was lucky. Came at the right time, worked hard. People here judge you by what you do, not where you came from. Is that why you stayed, when so many move on?" "Partly." His eyes met hers across the table. "I spent years drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. When I came to Silverwood Creek, something felt different. Like maybe this could be more than just another stop along the way." There was something in his expression, a vulnerability beneath the strength, that touched Theodora deeply. Before she could respond, the music suddenly swelled, and cheers erupted as the dance floor opened. "Come on," Dante said, standing and extending his hand. "You can't come to a harvest festival and not dance." Theodora hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I should warn you, my dancing experience is limited to formal waltzes and quadrilles at St. Louis society functions." His laugh was warm and genuine. "This isn't quite as structured. Just follow my lead and enjoy yourself." The first dance was a lively reel that had couples whirling around the platform, switching partners and circling back together. Theodora was tentative at first, but Dante's steady guidance and the infectious energy of the music soon had her laughing as she spun from his arms to another partner, and back again. They danced through 2 more energetic numbers before the musicians shifted to a slower waltz. When Dante drew her closer, his hand warm at her waist, Theodora felt a different kind of breathlessness overtake her. "You're a natural," he murmured as they moved smoothly across the floor, their steps falling into easy synchrony. "I had excellent instruction in St. Louis," she replied, then added with a smile, "though none of my dance masters ever made it quite so enjoyable." "High praise indeed." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Are you glad you came tonight?" "Very much so." Theodora realized with some surprise that she meant it completely. The evening had awakened something in her that had been dormant during her months on the run, a simple joy in being present, in connecting with others without fear or pretense. As the waltz ended, Dante reluctantly released her. "Would you like something to drink? I could use some air myself." They made their way to the edge of the square, where barrels of cider had been set up. The night had deepened, stars emerging in the vast Wyoming sky, but the festival showed no signs of winding down. If anything, the celebration had grown more boisterous, fueled by good food, music, and the potent homemade spirits some of the men were passing around. Dante handed her a cup of cider, then gestured toward a quieter spot away from the main crowd. "Mind if we step away from the noise for a moment?" They found a bench beneath a large cottonwood tree at the edge of the square, close enough to still see and hear the festivities but removed enough for conversation. The night air had grown cooler, and Theodora found herself drawing her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "Cold?" Dante asked, noticing the gesture. "A little. The nights here are chillier than I expected." Without hesitation, he removed his suit jacket and placed it around her shoulders. The garment was still warm from his body, carrying a scent that was distinctly his: leather, soap, and something indefinable that reminded her of open spaces. "Thank you." She drew it closer, touched by the simple courtesy. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the dancers, the amber light from the lanterns casting everything in a dream-like glow. When Dante finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to belong somewhere. Theodora turned to look at him, curious. Yes, I understand that feeling. Spent most of my life searching for it myself. He met her gaze directly. When I saw you that day on Main Street facing down those bounty hunters, something about you reminded me of myself years ago. Alone, trying to outrun the past, looking for a place that could become home. The insight was so accurate it momentarily robbed her of words. Is that why you helped me? Because you saw yourself, partly. He looked down at his hands, strong and calloused from years of ranch work. But there was something else too. Something I can't quite explain except to say. I felt like I knew you, even though we'd barely met all those years ago. The admission hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning Theodora wasn't sure she was ready to examine. Yet she couldn't deny the strange resonance of his words, the echo of something she'd felt herself. I've only been in Silverwood Creek a short time, she said carefully, but I already feel more at home here than I did during years in St. Louis. Dante's expression softened. The West has a way of stripping away pretenses. Out here, you can't hide behind social niceties or family connections. You're judged by who you are, what you're willing to work for. A smile tugged at his lips. Though I've noticed you kept some of those Eastern manners. My ranch hands were mighty impressed when you called on the Diamond P yesterday to discuss school arrangements for the foreman's children. Theodora laughed. I think they were more impressed by my willingness to accept payment in firewood and fresh eggs than by my manners. That too. His smile faded into something more serious. You're good with people, Theodora. You see them for who they are, not what they can offer you. That's rare, especially out here where everyone's fighting to survive. The compliment warmed her more than his jacket. I could say the same about you. The way people speak of you in town, you've earned their respect. Respect comes with responsibility. He gazed out at the celebration, his profile strong in the lantern light. These people are more than neighbors. They're the closest thing to family I've found since I left home. I'd do anything to protect them, to help this town prosper. In that moment, looking at his weathered face and the quiet determination in his eyes, Theodora understood something fundamental about Dante Prescott. Beneath the capable exterior of the successful rancher was a man who had created his own definition of home and family when the traditional versions had been denied him. It was a revelation that made her own heart ache with recognition. A loud burst of laughter from the dance floor drew their attention back to the festivities. Mayor Thompson was attempting a particularly energetic jig, to the delight of the onlookers. We should probably return before we're missed, Theodora suggested, though part of her was reluctant to break the intimate moment they'd shared. Dante nodded, rising and offering his hand to help her up. One more dance before I take you home. I'd like that. She slipped her arms out of his jacket and handed it back with a smile. Thank you for sharing this evening with me. The pleasure was entirely mine, he replied, his voice low and sincere in a way that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. As they rejoined the dancers for a final waltz, Theodora felt something shift inside her, a settling, as if pieces of herself that had been scattered during her flight from St. Louis were slowly coming back together, forming a new pattern, a different woman than the one who had left. And as Dante's arm encircled her waist, guiding her through the dance with that same steady assurance he brought to everything, she wondered if perhaps this unexpected connection with him was part of the pattern, forming a thread she hadn't anticipated, but now couldn't imagine being without. The next morning, Theodora woke to the sound of rain pattering against her window. The harvest festival had ended well after midnight, with Dante escorting her home like a perfect gentleman, though the lingering pressure of his lips against her hand, as they said good night, suggested something less than gentlemanly in his thoughts. The memory brought a smile to her face as she dressed for the day. Sunday in Silverwood Creek meant church for most residents, and while Theodora had never been particularly devout, she recognized the social importance of attending services in a small Western community. She donned a simple blue dress and made her way downstairs, where several other boarders were gathering for breakfast before church. Ida Miller's cooking was another benefit of the boarding house hearty, flavorful meals that put the hotel's offerings to shame. "Morning, Miss Ellis," greeted Timothy Walsh, the young bank clerk who occupied the room across from hers. "Saw you at the festival last night with Prescott. Quite the dancer, ain't he?" "He is indeed, Mr. Walsh." Theodora accepted a cup of coffee from Ida with a grateful smile. "The whole evening was delightful. First time I've seen Dante at a social function in months," Ida commented, setting a plate of eggs and biscuits before Theodora. "Usually claims he's too busy at the ranch. Must be special company that drew him out." The older woman's knowing look made Theodora blush slightly. "We're simply friends. He's been kind enough to help me get acquainted with the town." Hum. Ida's skeptical hum made it clear she didn't believe this modest assessment for a moment. "Well, friend or otherwise, it's good to see him taking an interest. Man works too hard, needs someone to remind him there's more to life than cattle and fence lines." Theodora changed the subject, asking about church services, but she couldn't help pondering Ida's words. Was Dante's attention to her unusual enough to cause comment? The thought was both flattering and mildly alarming. She had come to Silverwood Creek seeking anonymity, a chance to establish herself without the weight of her past or others' expectations. Yet in just over a week, she had become the subject of town speculation due to her association with one of its most prominent citizens. The rain had lessened to a drizzle by the time they walked to the small white church on the edge of town. Theodora was glad for her umbrella as she picked her way around puddles that had formed in the unpaved street. The church was already filling with families when she arrived, the atmosphere warm and welcoming despite the dreary weather outside. She slipped into a pew near the back, nodding greetings to the families she'd met during the week. Just as the reverend was about to begin the service, the door opened once more, and Dante entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. His eyes scanned the congregation briefly before finding her, and a small smile touched his lips as he made his way to her pew. "May I?" he asked quietly, indicating the empty space beside her. Theodora nodded, moving slightly to make room. She was acutely aware of his presence throughout the service, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of soap and leather that seemed to cling to him, the way his deep voice joined the hymns with surprising grace. Reverend Matthews delivered a sermon about community and faith that seemed particularly relevant to Theodora's circumstances. He spoke of how true belonging came not from birth or wealth, but from the connections formed through shared purpose and mutual care. "In the eyes of God, we are not defined by where we came from or the mistakes of our past," the reverend intoned, his gaze sweeping across the congregation. "We are defined by the choices we make each day, by the love we show to our neighbors, by our willingness to build something lasting together in this harsh but beautiful land." The words resonated deeply, and Theodora found herself blinking back unexpected tears. Beside her, Dante shifted slightly, his hand coming to rest briefly, reassuringly against hers where it lay on the pew between them. The simple gesture spoke volumes, anchoring her when memories threatened to pull her back into uncertainty. After the service, the congregation lingered despite the continuing drizzle, exchanging news and greetings under the shelter of the church porch. Theodora found herself drawn into conversations about the upcoming school term, fielding questions from mothers eager to ensure their children would receive proper education. "Miss Ellis," Mayor Thompson approached, his round face beaming. "Just the person I wanted to see. The town council has approved funds to purchase books for the school. We'll need your guidance on what to order." "I'd be happy to provide a list," Theodora replied, pleased by this evidence of the town's commitment to education. "Though I must warn you, my standards may be somewhat exacting." "We'd expect nothing less from a lady of your background," the mayor said with a chuckle. "Perhaps you could meet with the council this week, say Tuesday afternoon. That would be fine." Theodora was about to inquire about other supplies when she noticed 3 riders approaching the church from the direction of Main Street. The conversation around her gradually quieted as others noticed the newcomers as well. Even through the rain, Theodora recognized the pockmarked face of the bounty hunter who had confronted her the previous week. Her heart sank. She had hoped they were truly gone, that Dante's warning had been enough to send them permanently on their way. Beside her, Dante had gone very still, his posture subtly shifting to place himself between her and the approaching men. "Mayor," he said quietly, "perhaps you could escort the ladies inside while we see what these gentlemen want." Mayor Thompson, suddenly looking less jovial, nodded his understanding. "Of course. Ladies, I believe Reverend Matthews was about to show us the new hymn books in the vestry." As the women and children were ushered back into the church, several of the men, including Sheriff Holloway, moved to form a loose semicircle at the bottom of the steps. Theodora allowed herself to be guided toward the door but paused just inside, unable to completely withdraw when her presence was clearly the cause of the confrontation. The bounty hunters reined in their horses a respectful distance from the church. The leader, the pockmarked man, dismounted and approached, stopping a few yards from the assembled townsmen. "Didn't expect to find you at prayer, Prescott," he called, his voice carrying easily in the damp air. "Seems a mite hypocritical, given what we know about your past." A ripple of tension passed through the men on the steps. Dante's expression remained impassive, but Theodora could see the tightening of his shoulders beneath his Sunday coat. "State your business, Flynn." Sheriff Holloway stepped forward. "This is neither the time nor place for whatever grievance you think you have." "No grievance, Sheriff. Just here to collect what we're owed." Flynn's gaze shifted, searching the church entrance, and Theodora instinctively stepped further into the shadows. "We've got new information about Miss Theodora Ellis, or Matilda Winters, or whatever name she's using today. Seems she took something that doesn't belong to her when she fled St. Louis, something very valuable to Mr. Blackwell. Miss Ellis is a respected member of this community," Mayor Thompson spoke up, his voice firmer than Theodora had ever heard it. "If you have legal claims against her, you can present them properly to the court in Cheyenne." Flynn spat to the side, a gesture of contempt that seemed especially offensive in front of the church. "We ain't got time for courts and judges. Mr. Blackwell's offering $500 for the return of his property and the woman who stole it, dead or alive." A collective intake of breath from the townsfolk was followed by an ominous silence. Theodora felt cold dread settle in her stomach. $500 was a fortune, enough to tempt even decent men in these harsh frontier lands. "You're making accusations without proof," Dante said, his voice dangerously quiet, "and threatening a woman in front of God's house on the Sabbath. I suggest you leave town, Flynn, before you do something you won't live to regret." Flynn's hand drifted toward his holster. Big talk from a man with his own secrets. Wonder what these good folks would think if they knew the real Dante Prescott. Sheriff Holloway stepped between them, hand raised. "That's enough. Flynn, I'm giving you and your men 1 hour to leave Silverwood Creek. After that, I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace and threatening a citizen." For a moment, it seemed Flynn might push the confrontation further. His fingers twitched near his gun, and his companions shifted restlessly on their horses. Then, with a twisted smile that contained no humor, he backed away. "This ain't over, Sheriff. Not by a long shot." His gaze swept the gathered townsfolk. $500 to anyone who brings us the Ellis woman or information on what she stole. We'll be camped at Dover Creek for the next 3 days. With that, he mounted his horse and the 3 men rode away, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Theodora leaned against the door frame, her legs suddenly weak. What had they meant about something she'd stolen? The only things she'd taken from St. Louis were the clothes on her back and the evidence of Edmund's crimes, evidence that had already served its purpose in bringing him to justice. And what had Flynn meant about Dante's past? The pointed comment had clearly been intended to cast doubt, to drive a wedge between Dante and the community that respected him. As if sensing her thoughts, Dante turned toward the church entrance, his eyes finding hers immediately. The expression on his face was a complex mixture of concern, determination, and something that looked almost like guilt. He crossed to her in quick strides, the other men parting to let him pass. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, taking her elbow to steady her. "What did they mean about something I stole?" Theodora whispered, aware of the curious gazes now focused on them. "I took nothing but the evidence against Edmund, and that went to the authorities." Dante's jaw tightened. "It's a tactic, nothing more. They're trying to turn the town against you, make it easier to take you without resistance." His eyes darkened. "We need to talk, but not here. Can you meet me at the Diamond P this afternoon? I'll send a wagon for you." The urgency in his voice alarmed her, but she nodded. "Yes, of course." "Good." He squeezed her arm gently, then addressed the crowd that had gathered back on the porch. "Folks, I think we all know these men's claims are nothing but attempts to collect an unjust bounty. Miss Ellis has been nothing but honest with us about her circumstances." "What about his comment regarding you, Prescott?" The question came from Henry Williams, the town's most prosperous merchant and a member of the council. "Seemed to suggest you're hiding something yourself." A brief flicker of something pain perhaps crossed Dante's face before his expression settled back into calm resolve. "Every man has parts of his past he's not proud of, Williams. I've never claimed to be perfect, but I've been honest in my dealings with this town and its people. Dante saved my Joseph when our wagon overturned in the creek last spring." Martha Jenkins, the doctor's wife, spoke up firmly. "And it was his men who brought supplies when half the town was down with influenza last winter. I don't care what he did before he came here, he's proven his character by his actions among us." Murmurs of agreement followed her statement, and Theodora saw some of the tension leave Dante's shoulders. Sheriff Holloway stepped forward again, his weathered face grave. "Nonetheless, we need to take these threats seriously. Flynn and his kind don't make idle talk." He turned to Theodora. "Miss Ellis, it might be best if you stayed somewhere other than the boarding house for a few days, somewhere less obvious." "She can stay at the Diamond P," Dante said immediately. "I've got men watching the property day and night since we've had trouble with rustlers. It's the safest place outside of town." Theodora opened her mouth to protest the propriety of such an arrangement would have been unthinkable in St. Louis, but the practical concerns of her safety overrode social considerations. Still, she hesitated, glancing at Ida Miller. The older woman nodded encouragingly. "It's the sensible thing, dear, just until this ugliness passes." "Very well," Theodora agreed, feeling as though events were spinning rapidly beyond her control. "Thank you for your concern, all of you. I never meant to bring trouble to Silverwood Creek." Trouble finds its way here with or without help, Miss Ellis, Reverend Matthews said kindly. What matters is how we face it together. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of arrangements. Ida helped Theodora pack a small valise with essentials, while Sheriff Holloway posted deputies at strategic points around town to watch for Flynn's return. By early afternoon, Dante's foreman, Miguel Reyes, arrived with a wagon to transport Theodora to the Diamond P. "Mr. Prescott is already at the ranch, Señorita," Miguel explained as he helped her into the wagon. "He asked me to bring you directly." The journey to the Diamond P took nearly an hour, following a winding road that gradually left the town behind and entered rolling ranch land. Despite her anxiety about the situation, Theodora couldn't help admiring the scenery, golden grasses rippling in the breeze, distant mountains etched against the sky, cattle grazing in fenced pastures that seemed to stretch for miles. The ranch house itself was larger and more impressive than she had expected. Built of sturdy logs with a wide covered porch, it stood on a gentle rise overlooking a creek lined with cottonwood trees. Several outbuildings, including a bunkhouse, barn, and corrals, formed a loose semicircle behind it. Men were visible working with horses in one of the corrals, while smoke rose from the chimney of what appeared to be a cookhouse. Miguel pulled the wagon to a halt before the main house, just as Dante emerged onto the porch, his expression clearing with relief when he saw her. "Thank you, Miguel," he said, coming down the steps to help Theodora from the wagon. "Tell Maria we'll have a guest for dinner." "She, patron." Miguel touched the brim of his hat respectfully before driving the wagon toward the barn. "Welcome to the Diamond P," Dante said, taking her valise. "I'm sorry about the circumstances." Theodora looked around, taking in the well-maintained buildings and the orderly activity of the ranch hands. "It's beautiful. You've built something remarkable here." A hint of pride touched his features. "It's taken time. When I first bought the land, there was nothing but a falling-down cabin and overgrazed pasture." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside. We have much to discuss, and you must be tired after the morning's events." The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, with sturdy furniture, colorful woven rugs, and signs of a bachelor's lifestyle in the practical arrangement of rooms. The main living area featured a large stone fireplace, bookshelves filled with volumes that surprised Theodora with their variety, and windows that captured the sweeping views of the ranch lands. "Please, sit." Dante indicated a leather armchair near the fire, which had been lit against the day's chill. "Can I offer you coffee? Or perhaps something stronger, given the circumstances?" "Coffee would be fine, thank you." Theodora sank into the chair, the events of the morning finally catching up with her. "Dante, what's happening? Why would they claim I stole something valuable? And what did that man mean about your past?" Dante busied himself with the coffee pot that sat warming on the hearth, his back to her as he considered his words. When he finally turned, handing her a steaming cup, his expression was grave. "Flynn is trying to create justification for taking you by force. If he can convince people you're a thief, they're less likely to interfere." He sat in the chair opposite hers. "As for his comments about me, that's more complicated." Theodora waited, sensing his reluctance to continue, but knowing they had moved beyond the point where secrets could be safely kept. Dante stared into the fire for a long moment before speaking again. "Before I came to Wyoming, I rode with a group of men in Kansas. We started as cowhands, but the outfit's owner was a hard man who cheated his workers and mistreated his stock. When the war came, everything fell apart. Men got desperate." He paused, his face shadowed with old regrets. "We robbed a bank in Lawrence. No one was supposed to get hurt, but things went wrong. A guard pulled a gun. Shots were fired. By the time it was over, 2 men were dead, the guard and one of our own. Theodora's grip tightened on her cup, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue. I didn't fire the fatal shots, but I was there, participated in the planning, acted as lookout. His eyes, when they finally met hers, held a bleak honesty that spoke more powerfully than words. I've spent every day since trying to make amends, to be a better man than the one who made those choices. Does anyone in Silverwood Creek know? Sheriff Holloway does. I told him when I first settled here, wanted to start honest. He agreed to give me a chance based on the condition that I never return to that life. A small, humorless smile touched his lips. Flynn recognized me from those days. He rode with a rival outfit, saw me once in a saloon in Abilene. Theodora absorbed this information, weighing it against what she knew of the man before her, his kindness to her, his standing in the community, the evidence of his hard work and honest dealing in the very ranch that surrounded them. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said finally. Dante looked surprised, as if he'd expected a different reaction. "You're not disturbed by this revelation?" "I'm not in a position to judge another person's past mistakes, Dante. Not when I'm sitting in your home, because my own past has put me in danger." She set down her cup, leaning forward slightly. "We all have chapters we wish we could rewrite." Relief softened the hard lines of his face. "Flynn will use this against me if he can. Try to turn the town, make them doubt my word about you. You think he'll succeed?" "Some may waver, but most have known me long enough to judge me by my actions here, not rumors of a past they never witnessed." Dante's confidence in his neighbors was touching. "Still, we need to consider your safety first. Flynn won't give up easily, not with that amount of money at stake." "Could I simply confront them? Explain that I took nothing from the Blackwells except evidence of Edmund's crimes? Too dangerous. Men like Flynn don't care about explanations or justice. They want the bounty, and they'll do whatever it takes to claim it." His expression darkened. "No, we need a different approach." "Such as?" Before Dante could answer, a knock at the door interrupted them. He rose, hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he recognized the pattern of the knock. "Enter," he called. Miguel stepped inside, removing his hat respectfully. "Rider coming, patron. It's Sheriff Holloway." Dante nodded. "Show him in when he arrives, and Miguel double the watch tonight. 2 men at all times, rotating shifts." "She, comprendo." The foreman departed, leaving them alone again. "Holloway wouldn't ride out here unless something has happened," Dante said, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "We should prepare for bad news." Within minutes, the sheriff arrived, his expression confirming Dante's prediction before he even spoke. After declining offers of coffee or whiskey, Holloway got straight to the point. Flynn's men were seen talking to miners at the Golden Nugget Saloon, offering money for information about Miss Ellis and her habits. The sheriff's weathered face was grim. "They're claiming she stole a valuable necklace from Mrs. Blackwell before fleeing St. Louis, a family heirloom worth thousands." "That's absurd," Theodora exclaimed. "I never took anything of value from the Blackwells. Mrs. Blackwell barely spoke to me, let alone gave me access to her jewelry." "I believe you, Miss Ellis," Holloway assured her, "but the story's spreading. $500 is a powerful motivator for men down on their luck, and the saloons are full of drifters passing through on their way to winter work." Dante paced before the fireplace, his mind clearly working through options. "What about your deputies? Can you spare men to patrol the ranch boundaries? That's the other problem. Got word of trouble at the Morrison homestead, possible Indian raiding party. Had to send most of my men to investigate." Holloway looked apologetic. "I can leave 1 deputy here, but that's all I can spare." The news was worse than Theodora had feared. Without the sheriff's full protection, and with bounty hunters actively recruiting help in town, the Diamond P suddenly seemed less secure than it had upon her arrival. "What about sending a telegram to the authorities in St. Louis?" she suggested. "Surely they could confirm that no theft was reported, that these claims are fabricated." "Takes too long," Dante said, shaking his head. "Flynn won't wait for an official response. He's building a story to justify taking you by force, and he's moving quickly." Holloway nodded agreement. "Prescott's right. We need to focus on immediate safety." He hesitated, then added reluctantly, "There is another option to consider. The eastbound train passes through Clearwater Junction tomorrow morning. It's 30 miles from here, but with a fast horse, you could make it by dawn." The suggestion hung in the air, its implications clear. She could flee again, start over somewhere new, continue the cycle of running that had defined her life for months. The thought filled Theodora with a weariness that reached bone deep. How long could she keep running? How many new identities could she create before losing herself entirely? "No," she said firmly, surprising both men with her vehemence. "I won't run anymore. Silverwood Creek is my home now. I have a position, responsibilities to the children who need education. I won't abandon that because of lies and threats." Dante's expression softened with something that looked remarkably like pride. "Then we stand and fight." "With what army?" Holloway asked pragmatically. "Flynn's gathering men in town. You've got ranch hands, but they're cowboys, not gunfighters." "We don't need an army," Dante said, his mind clearly working through a plan. "We need to expose Flynn's lies and remove his leverage. If we can prove Miss Ellis stole nothing, that this is a personal vendetta rather than legitimate recovery of property, even his hired guns will think twice about risking their necks for no reward." "And how do you propose we do that?" the sheriff asked skeptically. Dante looked at Theodora, a question in his eyes. "If we could communicate directly with someone in authority in St. Louis, someone who could refute these claims officially." Theodora thought quickly. "My friend Mary Bennett. Her father is a judge, and she knows everything about my situation with the Blackwells. She could obtain official statements confirming no theft was reported." "Telegrams can be intercepted," Holloway warned. "Not if we send someone in person to Cheyenne," Dante countered. "They could send a secure telegram from there and wait for the response. 2 days, 3 at most." "And in the meantime?" Theodora asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "Flynn doesn't strike me as a patient man." Dante's expression hardened with determination. "In the meantime, we make the Diamond P an impregnable fortress. My men are loyal and they know every inch of this land. Flynn may have numbers, but we have home ground advantage." Holloway didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it could work. I'll send Deputy Wilson with your messenger to Cheyenne, adds official weight to the inquiry." "Miguel can leave at first light," Dante decided. "He's the fastest rider among my men, and I trust him completely." As they worked out the details of the plan, Theodora found herself watching Dante the decisive way he issued orders, the careful consideration he gave each aspect of their defense, the respect with which both the sheriff and his own men treated him. This was a man accustomed to leadership, to taking responsibility for others' safety and welfare. It was also, she realized with a clarity that surprised her, a man she was coming to care for deeply. Despite the danger that surrounded them, or perhaps because of it, the connection between them had intensified, revealing layers of character and compatibility that might have taken months to discover in ordinary circumstances. After Holloway departed with their carefully drafted telegram, Dante showed Theodora to the guest room that had been prepared for her, a simple but comfortable space with a view of the distant mountains. "I've asked Maria to bring you dinner here," he explained, setting her valise on a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. "I need to meet with my men, explain the situation, and organize watches. Will you be all right alone for a while?" "Yes, of course." Theodora summoned a smile despite her anxiety. "I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your door, Dante." He stepped closer, his expression intense. "You have nothing to apologize for. The trouble was Flynn's making, not yours." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I want you to know, whatever happens in the next few days, I don't regret helping you that first day in town. Not for a moment." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. "Nor do I regret accepting your help." For a moment they stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Dante cleared his throat, taking a step back with visible reluctance. "Get some rest if you can. Tomorrow will be challenging." As he turned to leave, Theodora called after him, "Dante." When he paused at the door, she asked the question that had been hovering in her mind. "Why are you doing all this, risking so much for someone you barely know?" He looked back at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. "I think you know the answer to that, Theodora. And I think you might feel it too." With that, he was gone, leaving her to contemplate the truth of his words and the unexpected path that had led her to this moment in danger. Yes, but also more alive than she had felt in years, with a man who saw beyond her masks to the woman beneath. Outside, the sun was setting over the Diamond P, casting long shadows across the land Dante had built from nothing. From her window, Theodora could see ranch hands moving purposefully between buildings, no doubt implementing the security measures he had ordered. Tomorrow would bring its own trials, but for tonight, despite everything, she felt a curious sense of peace. Whatever came, she would face it standing beside people who had chosen to defend her not because of her family name or social position, but because they believed in her worth as a person. It was, she realized, what she had been seeking all along, even before she knew what to call it: belonging. The night passed slowly, with Theodora drifting in and out of uneasy sleep, startled awake by every unfamiliar sound. Dawn found her at the window, watching as Miguel and Deputy Wilson rode out toward Cheyenne, the first phase of their plan in motion. A soft knock at her door announced the arrival of Maria, the housekeeper, a middle-aged Mexican woman with kind eyes and capable hands. She brought fresh water, towels, and an invitation to breakfast in the main room when Theodora was ready. "Senor Prescott, he is already up since before the sun," Maria informed her as she laid out the items. "The men, they are all at their posts. Do not worry, señorita. The patron, he will keep you safe." The simple faith in her employer's abilities was touching. "You've worked for Mr. Prescott a long time, 4 years, since he bought this ranch." Maria smiled, smoothing the bedspread with practiced efficiency. "He gave my family a chance when others would not hire Mexicans. My husband Miguel is his foreman. My son Alejandro works with the horses. We owe him much." Theodora found herself curious about the life Dante had built here, the community he had created around himself. "He seems well respected by everyone. He is a good man. Fair, honest." Maria crossed herself. "Not like the previous owner. That one was cruel, treated workers like animals. When Senor Prescott bought the ranch, many things changed for the better." These small glimpses into Dante's character, from those who knew him best, painted a picture of a man who had indeed worked hard to redeem his past mistakes, not through grand gestures, but through the daily choice to treat others with dignity and fairness. When Theodora joined Dante in the main room 30 minutes later, She found him at a large table spread with maps of the ranch, making notations with a pencil. He looked up at her entrance, his face brightening despite the evident strain of the situation. "Good morning. I hope you were able to rest, as well as could be expected." She accepted the cup of coffee he poured for her. "Have there been any developments?" "Nothing concerning yet. My men report all quiet on the boundaries." He indicated the maps. "I'm marking the most likely approaches Flynn might take if he decides to move against us. The ranch has natural defenses, the creek to the east, rocky ridges to the north, but there are still vulnerable points we need to watch." Theodora studied the detailed drawings, impressed by his strategic thinking. "You've planned for this kind of defense before. Had trouble with rustlers last year. Different circumstances, similar principles." His hand unconsciously moved to his shoulder, where she recalled he'd been shot during that confrontation. The advantage of home ground can't be overstated. They ate breakfast eggs, bacon, and fresh bread that Maria had baked that morning while Dante outlined the day's precautions. Theodora would remain in the house, away from windows when possible. Ranch operations would continue in a limited capacity, maintaining an appearance of normalcy while ensuring men were positioned to respond quickly to any threat. "What about the bounty hunters who were with Flynn?" she asked. "Could they already be watching the ranch?" "Possible, but unlikely without us noticing. My men know this land intimately, every approach, every vantage point." Dante's confidence was reassuring. "Still, we're taking no chances. Double watches, regular patrols of the perimeter." Their planning session was interrupted by the arrival of one of the ranch hands, a young man named Tom who served as a lookout on the road from town. "Rider coming, Mr. Prescott," he reported breathlessly. "It's the Rutherford boy from the dress shop in town. Says he has an urgent message for Miss Ellis." Dante and Theodora exchanged worried glances. "Bring him in," Dante instructed, his hand resting instinctively on his holstered revolver. Young Charlie Rutherford, no more than 16, entered the ranch house with wide eyes, clearly impressed by his first visit to the Diamond P. He clutched a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Ma sent this for Miss Ellis," he explained, handing it to Theodora. "Said it was finished early and might be needed, what with everything happening in town." Theodora accepted the package with confusion. "I don't recall ordering anything from your mother's shop." "It ain't from the shop exactly." Charlie shuffled his feet nervously. "Ma said to tell you it was from Mrs. Jenkins, the doctor's wife. She asked Ma to finish it special and get it to you right away." Inside the package, Theodora found a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be a locket on a delicate gold chain. A note was folded beneath it, written in a careful feminine hand. "Miss Ellis, this belonged to my grandmother. Inside is a lock of her hair and my grandfather's, exchanged on their wedding day. It has been in my family for generations. Given the claims being made against you, I thought having an heirloom in your possession might prove useful if confronted. Mrs. Jenkins suggests you wear it openly. The town stands with you. Martha Rutherford." "Clever," Dante murmured, reading over her shoulder. "If Flynn's men claim you stole a necklace, producing one with a clear provenance from a respected town family undermines their story." Theodora was touched by the gesture, the willingness of women she barely knew to use their own treasured possessions to protect her. "Please thank your mother and Mrs. Jenkins for their kindness," she told Charlie. "Tell them I'm deeply grateful." After the boy departed with a message of thanks and assurance of her safety, Theodora fastened the locket around her neck, the weight of it a tangible reminder of the community that had chosen to stand with her against false accusations. "You've made quite an impression on Silverwood Creek in a short time," Dante observed, watching her with a warmth that made her cheeks flush slightly. "I've done nothing to deserve such loyalty. You underestimate yourself. People recognize genuine character when they see it." His expression softened. Just as they recognize falsehood, Flynn's story won't hold up under scrutiny from those who have come to know you, even briefly. The day passed with agonizing slowness, each hour bringing both relief that no attack had materialized and increased tension as they wondered what Flynn might be planning. Theodora tried to keep busy, helping Maria with household tasks and assisting Dante in preparing supplies that might be needed if they faced a prolonged standoff. By late afternoon, new information arrived via one of Dante's men who had been sent to town for supplies. Flynn and his companions had been drinking heavily at the Golden Nugget, becoming increasingly belligerent as they tried to recruit local men to join their cause. Few had taken the bait, particularly after Sheriff Holloway's deputy had publicly posted notices clarifying that no official warrant existed for Theodora Ellis. "They're growing desperate," Dante concluded after hearing the report, "which makes them more dangerous, but also more likely to make mistakes." As evening approached, the ranch settled into watchful vigilance. Extra men were positioned at strategic points around the property, while those off duty gathered in the bunkhouse, weapons close at hand. In the main house, Dante checked and rechecked his rifles and revolvers, the methodical actions betraying the tension he otherwise kept carefully controlled. Theodora watched him from her seat near the fire, admiring the calm efficiency with which he prepared for whatever might come. "You've done this before, prepared for a fight." He glanced up from his weapons. "More times than I care to remember, though usually over cattle or water rights, not to protect a schoolteacher from bounty hunters." The gentle teasing in his voice brought a smile to her lips despite the circumstances. "I never imagined my life would take such a dramatic turn. Teaching arithmetic to frontier children seemed excitement enough when I left St. Louis. You regret it, coming west?" The question held layers of meaning beyond its simple words. Did she regret leaving the comforts and security of her former life? Did she regret the choices that had brought her to this moment of danger? Did she regret meeting him? "No," she answered honestly. "Despite everything, the hardships, the fear, even this current danger, I don't regret any of it. For the first time, I'm living according to my own choices, not someone else's expectations." Dante set aside his revolver, his expression thoughtful. "I felt the same way when I first came to Wyoming. Like I could finally breathe, become the person I was meant to be instead of the one circumstances had created." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of a horse approaching at speed. Dante was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with practiced caution. "One rider," he reported, tension evident in his voice, "coming fast from the direction of town." Within minutes, one of the ranch hands burst into the house without ceremony, his face flushed from hard riding. "Mr. Prescott, Flynn's gathered a group at least 8 men. They were heading this way when I left town. Sheriff tried to stop them, but they ignored his warnings." Dante's expression hardened. "How long ago?" 20 minutes, maybe less. They're riding hard. Sound the alarm, get everyone to their positions." Dante turned to Theodora as the ranch hand rushed out. "You should hide in the root cellar. It's the safest place if shooting starts." Theodora stood, smoothing her skirts with hands that only trembled slightly. "I won't hide while others risk their lives for me. I can load weapons, tend to injuries if needed." "Theodora," he began, his voice tight with concern, "I'm not helpless, Dante, and I refuse to cower in a cellar while you face danger on my behalf." Her chin lifted with determination. "This is my fight as much as yours." For a moment, he looked as though he might argue further. Then, with a short nod that contained both respect and resignation, he retrieved a small revolver from a drawer and handed it to her. "You know how to use this." "My father insisted I learn," ironically to protect myself on the frontier he was so certain was uncivilized. She checked the weapon with practiced movements that clearly surprised him. "5 shots. I'll make them count if necessary." A shout from outside announced the approaching riders, now visible on the road leading to the ranch. Dante moved quickly, extinguishing lamps to make the house a less obvious target, positioning himself at a window with a clear view of the yard. 8 men, as reported, Flynn in the lead. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had faced danger before and survived. "They're slowing, assessing our defenses." Theodora joined him, careful to stay to the side of the window where she would be less visible. In the fading light of dusk, she could make out the group of riders approaching the main house, Flynn's pockmarked face recognizable even at a distance. The men with him were a rough-looking lot, not local ranchers or townspeople, but the kind of drifters who followed opportunity and trouble in equal measure. Dante's men had taken up positions around the yard, behind water troughs, fence posts, and the corners of outbuildings. The standoff was clear. Flynn's group might have numbers, but they were exposed, while the ranch defenders held fortified positions. Flynn reined his horse to a stop a prudent distance from the house. "Prescott," he called, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "Send out the Ellis woman and we'll be on our way." No need for bloodshed. Dante stepped onto the porch, deliberately placing himself in full view while keeping his hand near his holstered revolver. "There's nothing for you here, Flynn. Miss Ellis has broken no laws, stolen no property." "You're trespassing on private land." "We've got witnesses say different," Flynn countered. "She took valuable property from the Blackwell family. We're authorized to recover it by any means necessary. Your witnesses are lying, and you know it." Dante's voice remained level, but Theodora could see the tension in his posture. "Sheriff Holloway has posted notices confirming no official charges exist against Miss Ellis. Whatever grudge Blackwell is nursing, it doesn't justify this." Flynn spat to the side, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Don't much care about official notices, Prescott. I care about the $500 I aim to collect. Now, we can do this easy or we can do it hard. Your choice." A tense silence followed his ultimatum, broken only by the nervous shuffling of horses and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Theodora felt her heart pounding against her ribs, aware that they stood at the precipice of violence. Just as Flynn seemed ready to issue further threats, the sound of approaching riders drew everyone's attention to the road. A cloud of dust heralded the arrival of several horsemen moving at speed toward the ranch. "Reinforcements?" one of Flynn's men asked nervously. As the new arrivals drew closer, Theodora recognized Sheriff Holloway at the head of the group, accompanied by Deputy Wilson Miguel, and several men she didn't immediately identify. "That's far enough, Flynn," Holloway called as they approached, his rifle resting meaningfully across his saddle. "You and your men are ordered to disperse immediately. I have official confirmation from the St. Louis authorities. There are no charges against Theodora Ellis, no reports of any stolen property." Miguel urged his horse forward, a paper clutched in his hand. "The telegram from the judge, Patron," he called to Dante. "We received it in Cheyenne and rode back immediately." Flynn's face darkened with anger and disbelief. "You're lying. Blackwell himself offered the reward." "Blackwell is acting without legal authority," Holloway replied firmly. "I have written confirmation from Judge Bennett of St. Louis that no theft was reported, no charges filed. Whatever personal vendetta Blackwell is pursuing, It has no basis in law. The mention of Judge Bennett, Mary's father, sent a wave of relief through Theodora. Her friend had come through, providing the official refutation they needed. Flynn looked around at his companions, clearly sensing their wavering resolve in the face of legal authority backed by armed men. His hand hovered near his gun, indecision written across his features. "Think carefully, Flynn," Dante advised, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and on the wrong side of the law. There's no money worth dying for here." For a moment, it seemed Flynn might choose violence despite the odds. His fingers twitched near his holster, his face contorted with frustrated rage. Then, with a vicious curse, he jerked his horse's head around. "This ain't over, Prescott. Not by a long shot." His gaze shifted to Theodora, who had stepped onto the porch beside Dante. "And you, Miss Ellis Blackwell, ain't a man who forgets. He'll find another way to make you pay. Tell Mr. Blackwell that any further harassment will result in legal action against him," Theodora replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "His son's crimes have already disgraced his family name. Does he truly wish to add his own illegal activities to that legacy?" The reminder of Edmund's public disgrace struck home. Flynn's expression twisted with impotent fury, but he offered no further threats. With a sharp gesture to his men, he wheeled his horse around and rode away, his reluctant companions following after exchanging uncertain glances. Sheriff Holloway waited until they were well down the road before approaching the house. "They'll be leaving the territory if they have any sense. I've sent telegrams to neighboring counties warning them about Flynn's illegal bounty hunting." "Thank you, Sheriff," Dante said, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "And thank you, Miguel, for your swift action. The telegram arrived just in time." Judge Bennett was most emphatic in his response. "Señorita," Miguel told Theodora with a smile. "He sends his personal assurances that you are under no suspicion in St. Louis and offers his assistance should you need further legal protection." The relief that washed over Theodora was so intense it made her knees weak. Dante's hand came to rest supportively at her elbow, a gesture that didn't escape the sheriff's observant eyes. "Well, I reckon my men and I should head back to town," Holloway said, a knowing smile tugging at his mustache. "Unless you need us to remain, Prescott." "I think the immediate danger has passed," Dante replied, his hand still steadying Theodora. "But I'd appreciate a rider tomorrow to confirm Flynn and his men have truly left the area." After the sheriff and his deputies departed, promising to return with news the following day, the ranch gradually settled back into its routine. The extra watches remained in place as a precaution, but the atmosphere of imminent danger had dissipated, replaced by a quiet celebration of crisis averted. Maria prepared a special dinner to mark the occasion, and to thank the men for their loyalty and courage. As darkness fell, Theodora found herself on the porch with Dante, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky, a comfortable silence between them. "What happens now?" she finally asked, voicing the question that had hovered in her mind since Flynn's departure. Dante leaned against the porch railing, his profile strong against the deepening twilight. "That depends on you. The danger appears to be past. You could return to town tomorrow, take up your teaching position as planned. And us?" The boldness of her question surprised even herself, but after facing armed bounty hunters, the risk of speaking her heart seemed small in comparison. Dante turned to face her fully, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. "What do you want there to be, Theodora?" In that moment, with the day's dangers behind them and the future stretching before her like the wide Wyoming horizon, Theodora found clarity. She had fled St. Louis seeking freedom, but what she'd found in Silverwood Creek in this man was something even more precious. The chance to build a life on her own terms, with someone who saw her true self and valued it. "I want there to be in us," she said simply. "I want to discover what might grow between two people who understand each other's pasts without being defined by them." The smile that transformed Dante's face made her heart race faster than any danger had. He stepped closer, one hand gently capturing hers while the other brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "I've known since that first day in town," he admitted quietly. "When you stood there facing down those bounty hunters, afraid but refusing to yield. I recognized something in you that called to something in me." His fingers traced her jawline with exquisite tenderness. "You can't hide from my heart, Theodora Ellis. It recognized you even when you were pretending to be someone else." The words from that first encounter, now spoken with such deep meaning, brought tears to her eyes. "I wasn't looking for you. I wasn't looking for anyone. The best things in life often find us when we're looking elsewhere," Dante murmured, his face inches from hers. "May I kiss you, Theodora?" Her answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Theodora surrendered to the moment, to the man who had risked everything to protect her. When they finally drew apart, breathless and smiling, Theodora knew with absolute certainty that her journey had brought her exactly where she was meant to be. Not running, not hiding, but standing tall beside a man who valued her courage as much as her heart. "I should return to town tomorrow," she said, resting her head against his chest. "The school term begins in 2 weeks. There's much to prepare." Dante's arms tightened around her. "Of course, though I hope you'll visit the Diamond P often, perhaps Sunday dinners to start." The practical planning for their future made her smile against his shirt. Sunday dinners would be lovely, and perhaps, when you're in town, you might call at the boarding house. I believe Ida Miller would be delighted to set an extra place at her table. A proper courtship then. The pleasure in his voice was unmistakable. "Though I should warn you, Miss Ellis, I don't intend to court you indefinitely. Once a man finds what he's been searching for, he's a fool to let it slip away." The implied promise of a more permanent arrangement in their future sent a thrill of happiness through her. "Then it's fortunate, Mr. Prescott, that I have no intention of slipping anywhere. I've found my home in Silverwood Creek and with you." Under the vast canopy of Wyoming stars, with the dangers of the past finally behind them, Dante sealed this pledge with another kiss, one that spoke of new beginnings, of a future built together, one day at a time. 1 year later, on a perfect September day that mirrored the harvest festival where they had first danced together, Theodora Ellis became Theodora Prescott, in a ceremony that united not just two people, but two life journeys that had converged against all odds. The small church in Silverwood Creek overflowed with well-wishers, her students and their families, Dante's ranch hands and their wives, the townspeople who had stood by them during that tense confrontation with Flynn and his bounty hunters. Even Mary Bennett had traveled from St. Louis to stand as Theodora's witness, bringing with her the final resolution of the Blackwell affair. Edmund's father had died, taking his grudge to the grave, leaving Theodora truly free at last. As Judge Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, and Dante lifted her veil to claim his kiss, Theodora reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her to this moment. She had fled St. Louis as a desperate young woman hiding behind another's name, only to find herself embraced for exactly who she was by a man with his own redemption story. "Happy, Mrs. Prescott," Dante whispered as they turned to face their cheering friends and neighbors. Theodora squeezed his hand, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible, Mr. Prescott." And later, as they danced beneath the same harvest moon that had witnessed their first waltz a year before, Dante pulled her close and murmured the words that had started it, all the words that had recognized her true self, even when she was hiding. "You can't hide from my heart, Theodora. It would find you anywhere." She smiled up at him, this man who had become her partner, her protector, her home. "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm exactly where I belong." And she was in his arms, in the community that had welcomed her, in the life they would build together on the Diamond P Ranch. The Eastern debutante and the reformed outlaw, each with pasts they had overcome, now facing a future as bright and limitless as the Wyoming sky above them. Theodora Ellis had stopped running, stopped hiding behind another's name. Instead, she had claimed a new name, Prescott, one given freely in love rather than adopted in fear. And in doing so, she had found not just safety, but the belonging she had sought all along.